right, there's a little bit of a technical hiccup, but I think we're good to go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's stream, where we will be working on some random plugin-y type stuff. I'm testing out some new things over in Yon OBS, so we'll see what's going on here. And plans for the stream, such as they are. If you have any questions, make sure you can always drop those down in the comment section below. We are going to continue working, I think, on the plugin that we were working in the last stream. That seemed like it's a fun little time to be had here. Yeah, just making sure everything is cool. So we're trying out something a little bit different. I managed to get OBS to use browser sources in a happy way. So what I've actually managed to do is embed the chat directly in OBS's window, um, which makes it a little bit nicer for display purposes over here on this monitor. Unfortunately, I can't interact with that chat because Google does not allow anything that uses Chromium to log in. So kind of unfortunate in that regard. Perhaps there's a way around that. Haven't quite discovered it yet. So I think we're gonna hop in. And interestingly, chat in there. Hello, Ben. Does not update with nearly the regularity as it might seem. Oh, one other thing to test. We'll see how well this works, but the API seems kind of funky. I set this thing up, so in theory, if I press this button, we get to see chat, sort of. I mean, clearly Ben said something, but I guess this thing doesn't display emojis. It only displays text. And also, for some reason, the very first thing that happens in the chat doesn't get to be displayed for reasons I don't understand. I don't think that's lined up properly either. Basically, what I did was set all this thing up. I typed something into the chat, which is now redacted if you see back there, and lined everything up. The very first message appeared perfectly in the tab. And then I typed another message and the whole thing jumped up and then it stopped displaying the first part of that, and I don't know what the reasoning for that is. Any case, I also have one of these for the other display. Just something I'd like to, play around with now that I have the ability to do so. But we're going to go ahead and hide that up. That's a very crude image. It doesn't have a drop shadow or the correct transparency on the image. It's a real drag. Without further ado, I think, since everything seems to be going cool, let's do a little bit of this. Hello, everybody, and hello, Ben and Ayush. Welcome to tonight's live stream, where we're going to be continuing work on me going slightly crazy by weird highlights appearing over here in my obs for reasons I don't understand. Thank you. And also the plugin that we were working on in the last stream, which is going to be a completion handler for working with plugins. I have multiple coffees here. One of them tastes like cinnamon buns. That would be that one. And then I have one that doesn't. This plugin here, if you happen to be a member of the Sublime Text forum, somebody asked earlier something that, I can close those out, for basically a snippet that would allow you to grab multiple things and combine them together into one. And of course, snippets can't do that because snippets replace, when they trigger, all of the selections, and basically what the guy wanted was like something like this. You wanted to be able to select one thing, select the other thing, and convert it into, if I push the right key, that, which clearly doesn't highlight correctly here. And so the very first selection would be the text of the list item, and the second thing would be the key. And I came up with this simple little insert snipper wrapper command. Fortunately, I always test stuff before I let anybody see it, because there was a couple of issues with this. One, make sure you use begin and end when you're spanning the selection and not A and B, because if someone makes the selections like I did here, that went wrong. Fortunately, that was a very easy thing, and I sort of suspected that it was going to go wrong as I was pushing the key. And the other thing is, originally I just thought I'll just call insert snippet after I grab all of the selections and stick them into the variables. No big deal. And then soon as I did it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. If you insert snippet and there's two selections, both of them get the text. So basically what I just did was create a selection that spans from the start of the first selection to the end of the last selection, which could conceivably be one selection. I never actually tested that case, so that's unfortunate. Oh, I should have probably told the guy that he could add a context on that to have multiple things, multiple selections active. But in any case, the thing I love about Sublime Text being able to come up with stuff like that to make your life a little bit better. Kind of like the topic of yesterday's video, using a completion handler to be able to basically invoke insert snippet to insert a snippet and then also take other actions because we can now trigger commands in response to auto completion. So following on with one of the things we worked on as a question in the last live stream, somebody that wanted to insert a snippet and have stuff automatically folded, quite easy to do. This is probably something I should keep around, but we'll rename it like yaw so that I can remember. I have a gigantic backlog of things that are plugins in my user folder that could probably be added to the scraps repository, but I keep forgetting. Okay, and running out of time to a large degree. So what was that plugin we were working on? It was user plugin completions. Right on. Again, the idea of this is that we've added a completion for event listener that will expand stuff out. So this is the name of that, and then it jumps down there. And clearly this would have more completion in it than it does currently, but that's less interesting for this point. That's something that could be expanded out, of course. I had a thought in much the same way that the browse command list finds all of the commands that are available by introspecting the plugin environment. One of the things that the plugin environment has, which user code should probably not touch, but this isn't really something that I would expect to share with anybody in an official capacity, is information on the different classes, but also what events exist for event listeners. Because the thing that I'm going to try to fiddle with tonight a little bit is if we were inside of a class like this and we knew that was a view event listener, could we do OL here or load and have it offer us a completion for the onload event or the onload async event, and then allow us to jump that? Expand it out. Sorry. And again, if you weren't here at the very beginning of the stream, I'm testing out a new chat mechanism here, which potentially has a 5 to 10 second lag between when you say something and when I actually see it, for reasons I don't fully understand, because it seems to be running at like 30 frames a second. But in any case, please do not worry if I seem to not catch your question. I may blump that out of there and go back to the other way. We'll see what's happening there. So my theory on this is that in order to know what completions should be in this particular class based on a current cursor location, we want to know basically the name of this, right? The name of the actual class that's a subclass. And there's entity other inherited class, which I believe gathers said information. So we could grab that out of the buffer, all of those regions, and then figure out which one is us, which is not necessarily perfect, but should do pretty good, I think. I would imagine we want to make sure that we are somewhere inside of meta class. Whoops. Oh, that scope isn't applied to everything. It's only applied to that, right? So let's see. If we'd searched for meta.class, let's see, scope view scopes. That's the meta.class line. That would be everything. Meta.class.inheritance is that would be that part. So if we did a maybe if I spelled it correctly, ents indeed. Inheritance, that would give us that, which I guess has, it also includes that part, which is interesting because I was curious. How sensitive is Python to syntax of this sort? Like, I would imagine that probably works, right? So if we did it again, that still ends up being the whole thing. And that still ends up being there. So cool. Seemed like an easy way to be able to parse the content of the text in this thing. Entity other inherited class. Entity.other inherited class. Now, of course, this really relies on the syntax that you're using. You can close that up for now. But I think on the whole, that should probably work, right? Maybe test that with a bigger plugin. Let's say, what's the only one thing in that one, right? Yeah, most things in default are probably only going to have one. Probably a few things in there, right? Right, so what was it? Entity.other. No matching scopes found. Right. Just because I can't remember these things. And it should be totally be remembering that. I'm kind of surprised that it's not. Entity.other.inherited-class. Gotcha. Lister? Yeah, I probably have that named incorrectly, don't I? How many of those did it find? Boop, boop, boo. Larger test. I was kind of hoping that this whole thing would be scoped as class, but realistically, I guess that's probably tricky to do. Should I probably fix that, right? Oh, thank you not to point out my obvious spelling mistakes or all those times that I wrote commands and didn't add command to the end of the name, even though it doesn't matter. Honestly, let's do that. I do not trust an event listener class that has been renamed. Look more correcty correct? Yes. Okay, so that file went away, of course. So I guess the idea here is there are certain completions that we would want to have globally, like say this one here. And then ones that we would want to have just for methods. And for those ones, we'd want to have something specific, right? Oh yeah, that's going to get old real fast. Hang on a second here. I'm going to do that and this. I'm gonna manipulate. I'm gonna manipulate the chat. There we go. I got there in the end. For some reason, I misread what you said and didn't pay attention to what I was saying myself. This is why it's important to watch live streams and not just edited videos, because I usually cut those sorts of things out of my videos and then make it look like I know what I'm talking about. Unlike yesterday's video, which had three problems in it. I wrote some C code just off the top of my head. Was pretty proud about how I got it to the end and everything seemed to be cool, and only noticed in the editing process that I missed, I accidentally typed an L instead of a semicolon inside of my sample C snippet, which made me sad, but fixing that would have involved re-recording everything because that template code appears everywhere. When I made the snippet, I spelled the description wrong, but for some reason I didn't notice it. My It seems more obviously colored wrong in the video recording than it did while I was recording it. So I think I may have been at a funny angle with the monitor because I was working at the table back there. But the most egregious, and the one that almost made me delete the video and re-upload it again, except it was like 2 o'clock in the morning when I got to that point, was I mentioned in the video that you can populate the snippet from the command palette, and I typed in the item, the filter to get it there, and I had a screenshot. I had the video paused at that point, and I put in the animated orange box going around the snippet showing here's where it is. But unfortunately for me, I did that too soon in the video, because as I was typing snippet colon, the results were filtering, and I added it near the beginning before I finished typing. So by the time I finished typing all the text, the list had sorted and reorganized itself enough that I was actually highlighting the wrong snippet. And I'm not sure whether live streaming leads to better code due to more eyes or worse code due to the distractions. I could go 50-50 on that one. Certainly, throughput suffers for, you know, narrating stuff and interacting with the chat, but mostly the implementation, or the initial impetus for me doing live streams in the first place was just sort of to put me on notice that there was specific times of the week that I had to work on packages and plugins, because I was having a hard time staying focused on that at the time, and being accountable for knowing that people could show up in the chat while I'm doing stuff, made sure that I carved out time for it. Of course, in the intervening 3 years, I've pretty much decided that the only thing I code is plugin. So at this point, probably not necessary for that reason, but it turns out I just like hanging out in the chat and working on stuff. And if nothing else, you get to see occasionally a variety of ways to do a thing, like what we have here, this code for determining if something is a plugin. And more often than not, you get to decide various ways to not do a thing, or in some cases, the variety of ways you could spell listener incorrectly if you don't know what the hell is going on. Whoa. So let's say we want something like this, and my theory is we implement a method. We might call it plugin class, and we're going to need a location. That's going to be tricky, isn't it? Because there can be more than one place where there's going to be a plugin. So we're going to have to be careful about that. Maybe. Where this is going to return the name of the class that you're currently inside of, which in this case would be Sublime plugin.view event listener, for example. And it could return none if you're not inside of a class. Actually, I think this needs to be location and not locations. And then one of the things we can do here is build up completions that would work inside of whatever class you happen to be inside of, if it's a plugin based class that we understand. That's the idea that I'm going with here anyway. So what we need to do is what? We need to find the list of these, right? Let's copy that for the time being. We already have a self.view, so that would be what self.view dot find by selector. Use the appropriate quotes, but we don't really need this because we already know it's a Python file. That, I guess, technically, we don't need those because we know we're in Python. The question becomes, do we need to worry about looking for entity other inherited class in any place other than the meta class line of a Python file? And to a larger degree, did I remember that correctly? Oops. Hey, look at that. Cool. So that would give us a list of all of the places. Then we could print just for test purposes. So right. This is interesting because I was in a live stream earlier for somebody else, and they were playing a game, but they had somebody working on code in the background. And it was the guy's girlfriend. She made a comment about how she was working on building up a table semi-dynamically, and everything would have worked great, except that she had a bunch of code to build up the different parts that you wanted to add to the table, but she missed the concatenation line that actually sticks them all together, and as a result, failure. And I specifically mentioned to her, you should hang out in one of my streams sometime because it's a litany of, hey, this function looks like it should work. Why doesn't it do what I want? Oh, I guess I should probably call it. Okay, so there's exactly one of these things. Right on. Okay. Now, this is one of those situations where if we wanted to be ridiculously clever about this, we would need to take a lot of precautions to see if this is the right thing, right? Like normally I create plugins by using this method of naming the class. I know it comes from Sublime plugin and it's view event listener, but someone could say from Sublime plugin import view event listener. Although, as Ben pointed out a few streams back, maybe not the greatest thing to do in general, depending on how you're accessing things. So this needs to be able to work with not only Sublime plugin.view event listener, but also view event listener. But if you get right down to it, theoretically, someone could say from Sublime plugin import view event listener as vel, and then you'd need to know that vel, just lowercase or uppercase or whatever, is a view event listener. And the only way to figure that out is to do more deeper introspection of the code, like look for import lines or something. And I am not interested in that level of complexity. I'm willing to assume that someone might use just a view event listener, but again, there's that line between easy and mostly works and completely bulletproof. You ride the balance of where you're willing to ride along that, and I'm more on this end because this is mostly going to be for me. And if somebody else wants to use it, they're free to use the Python AST code in the libraries to introspect things a little bit more deeply. But I went down that road when I worked on the browse plugins command, or the browse commands command, I should say. So I'm less interested in that than I could be. Now, we have this list of things. Now, we're going to need maybe another. Maybe for our purposes here, let's do this. We'll just call this print class command. And I mean, that's going to be cool, right? We will do this. Maybe we'll even indent that properly. We'll going to find the list of classes. Basically, the idea here is I want to be able to test with the key binding whether or not this is doing what I expect it to do. Because is that a thing? Let's test it out. What's my class? Cool. It's been a while since I've used bisect. Oh, also, hello, Ashwin. I totally missed saying hi to you there. I popped out the chat into another window, and it obnoxiously throws a gigantic box up in the middle, which sort of threw me off there for a minute. Let's just test this here too, just to see how we're looking. Not a super fan of the flash of white, I will say. And further pointing out that more work needs to be done on this. Apart from the visuals of no matter how much I size it to be smaller than the size of the window that it's in, that browser source really just wants to go right out to the edge. Further proving that CSS really vexes me no end. And also, why do emojis not appear? That is an intriguing thing as well. Anyway, that's again something I'm just sort of playing with. Probably needs to be a little bit bigger, different part of the screen aligned in a nicer fashion. As I was mentioning earlier, the what YouTube displays into the web page seems to differ depending on how many lines of text there are inside of it, or something to do with the changing the CSS really messed it up. In any case, would also be nice if that faded in and out. I'm not entirely sure how to pull that off. I'm assuming I need a whole separate duplicate scene or something. So if we had a list of classes, and then we need a point, which is going to be self.view.cell0.b. So wherever the cursor currently is, the idea is we want to find which class we are inside of, or for our purposes here, less inside of, because there's not really any scope information that would tell us, say at this particular point, that we're inside of a class, right? So the best we can do is look upwards to the first place where there's a class defined and assume that's probably where we are, right? And to some degree, we could also, again, if we wanted to be super bulletproof about this, do things like compare the indent level of the meta class line with ours. I'm imagining that that would only apply to the actual definition if it was indented in, perhaps. But we're horseshoesing this thing here. And so in order to do that, we need to get the list of all of the regions. Then we get the cursor location in this point, but in our actual plugin, it will be one of the locations that are passed on query completions. And then we just see which one we're in. And that requires me to remember how bisect works. I think we want bisect left. Again, it's something I've done before, but it has been a while. Let's see. Boop. Make sure I have the right thing and it's not going to blind anybody. And then we can stick it up here. Oh, also, that's gonna annoy me. Okay. I like to have the taskbar just be the windows that we can see and not the myriad of other windows on the other desktop. Okay, so bisect left or bisect right. Similar to bisect left, but returns an insertion point which comes after to the right of any existing entry. So I'm assuming we want bisect for this because we want to figure out where we come after an existing class, right? So let's build up a thing here. And let's see, arguments. Look for the insertion point of X in A to maintain sorted order, right? So the first thing is the list and the second thing is the point. So this would be S dot B for S in classes. And then the second thing would be the point. And that's going to return an index into the list. And I guess do we need to keep that per se? Let's go ahead and just print it. We'll see what we're getting first. Okay, so we need to bind this to a key. So let's go ahead and oops, don't do that. Thank you. Instances where autocomplete is kind of a butt. And this would be print class. Okay, so for example, if we did it here, it's after the first one. So the insertion point is after the first one. So if we did it here, it's going to be 0. That's going to be 1. If we look here for classes, that should always be 0 until we hit the first class, right? And then down in this area, it's going to be 1 everywhere until the next class. So here will be 1 and here will be 2. So whatever that index minus 1. Now what we need to also test is this. I guess 0 in this particular case would indicate that we're not inside of anything, right? Because we're giving it a list of integers and saying if we wanted this list to be sorted, where would this point go in that list? And if we end up with 0, that means it would go at the very beginning of the list, which means we're not inside of any class. But otherwise, you subtract 1 from the value, and that's going to be the index into the actual classes list for the one that represents the class that we're inside of. That makes sense? So this would be this, and then we can say if, just for testing purposes, if index is 0, I'm just going to very quickly do that because that's going to drive me mildly batty if we're going to have the console open. In fact, we'll even do this. That's going to be classes idx minus 1. Should theoretically be the thing, so no class. Story of my life as a whole. You got the live chat streaming to a buffer in Sublime? Technically, yes. I managed to. It's something that I've been sort of playing with off and on. I'm suspecting. Let's do that again for just a second. Now that I think I would have to set it to maybe not refresh the window or something. I think what's happening is because there's custom CSS that's controlling what's being displayed there. And if you say something now, you can track how long it takes before it actually appears inside of that chat window. For our purposes here, I'll put it over here. So that's not in the way of what I'm currently doing. We can see whether that Yeah, that actually seemed to update very quickly. So I guess maybe there's just something funky about the way OBS was putting it inside of a buffer. But yeah, I'm using some custom CSS here to sort of restyle things a little bit. For example, putting the text underneath instead of on the same line, because otherwise this window ain't nearly big enough to actually display anything. But stop highlighting it. Thank you. A part of some issues there, but there's this custom CSS that changes the display. So I was starting to say there between what normally would appear in a popped out chat and what appears there. And I think the way that the browser source works, it applies the CSS after the page has loaded or something along those lines. So also, hello, IOTQ, Internet of Things, cool universe. Welcome to the stream. We're playing with writing simple auto completions for Sublime Text plugins. Literally. Um, Anywhere I do this that's outside of a class should be no class, which is cool right up until, again, that is not, here, also not. Here, yes, theoretically. Oh, maybe I should have printed it, right? Ha 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 ha. I should have printed it and not returned it. Pardon me. Let's wrap that. Okay, how about now? It totally knows that Sublime plugin.window command and that. Now here's the $1 million test. It doesn't know about it there. So I would imagine probably we want that instead so that it'll work anywhere in here. I mean, for our purposes, are we actually going to try to insert a completion inside the name of one of these things? I hope not. But that would allow us to get the name from there forward. Seems nice, right? And based on what we learned, potentially the only place we want to actually try to insert a completion is when it just says source Python and it doesn't say anything else. Because anything else we're inside of a statement or something. Might be a thing to play with anyhow. So that is more or less what we're looking at for the thing we're trying to do, right? The name of the class that you're in is none if there isn't an index, otherwise that. As the initial basis for this. And again, this is one of those things I like to do when I'm working on various plugin bits. Try to pull simple to test parts out into something easier like this, as opposed to trying to do this inside of plugin completions here and then keep triggering it. So this is basically this. That still has self.view because this is a view event listener. Now, I guess what we could also do here is discard Sublime plugin dot off of the name of the thing if it actually was there, right? That seems like something that we should do. How's everybody's evening going so far? Or if not evening, morning, depending on where you're located. I believe it's sometime morning-ish for Ashwin and evening-ish for Ben, perhaps. I never 8 hours ahead of yeah, terrible at it, I tells you, terrible. Bad enough. And I may have mentioned most of the people that I work with personally at the company that I work at are headquartered in Toronto, which means that I have a lot of meetings during my lunch hour here because they're 3 hours ahead. So 3 o'clock in the afternoon is a great time for a meeting for them, but terrible for me because it's noon. Uh, Similarly, when people decide that 9 o'clock in the morning is a good time for a meeting and schedule it without asking or reminding me the day before, and then I don't go to the meeting because I generally don't wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and come into the office and turn on my computer to see if anybody scheduled a meeting. 4 p.m. There you go. Almost 4, 10 after. Yeah, sounds about right. I I like to say one of the files that we get that contains prices for Australia, and it's basically always tomorrow as far as any of those things are concerned because we get them after the end of the day. Causes no end of confusion for people, especially because our system at work, which handles instantaneous prices of stocks, Uh, we have ridiculous amounts of RAM and store everything in an AVL tree for maximum speed because there could be 50, 100,000 messages a second that need to be updated. You need to have a super fast structure, and conventional databases aren't going to cut it. So whenever a market opens, we throw away the data structure and create a brand new one to track just what's happening the current market day for that. And based on the time zone differences between Eastern and uh, the um, Australian time zones, often someone will play a file through the system and then come in the morning and say, I'm totally going to like generate a report on that. And it comes back empty because of the time that the market opens. They would have to remember to do it at a certain, earlier in their day than they actually get around to it. We spent a long time, a good period of like 4 months during testing, telling people over and over again, you need to test it earlier in the day. Show up first thing, run the test, then get your coffee. Don't do it the other way. But interestingly, we get market data from all over the world, but Australia is the one that seems to trip people up the most. I think because it has a more booming market than most other places, with the possible exception of Frankfurt. The Frankfurt Stock Exchange gets a lot of traffic. I think it's the biggest one in Europe, or at least the biggest one that we actively gather data for anyway. There's a system that we can talk to that fetches the data down, and it can take quite a while for them to send it off to us. Um, we might want something like this. So we can add on to this thing. Yeah. And the other thing is, Australia is not the only place that does that, but parts of it go into daylight savings time, and or they're a slightly different time. There's a couple of places that we deal with where uh, part of the markets in that particular country switch to daylight savings time at a different time of the year than the rest. I can't remember offhand if Australia is one of those, but I do know that there's multiple time zones there. But Australia has all of its numbers upside down. It takes a lot of effort to turn them back over. Yeah. I mean, I may have mentioned there's better than like half time zones. Yeah, there's a great video by Tom Scott on YouTube about time zones and programmers and why we want nothing to do with it. And if you've never watched it and you're a developer, you owe it to yourself to watch it, so that whenever somebody in a management meeting says something that nonsensical about times, you can display it to them after you stalk out of the room in anger at the whole operation. Because woof, man, it is non-cool. The dog is under the desk and dreaming of bunnies, from what I can see. There's a lot of snarling and flapping of feet. Corner of that, was that West Australia and South Australia? Is that what those mean? Yeah, Ben's seen that. I may have actually mentioned that in the previous chat, as a matter of fact, but I recommend Tom Scott videos in general, but that is a great one for hopefully his his bunny growls aren't making their way into the chat. He's a very happy dude. Let's do this. We might want something like that. Are completions case sensitive? That's what I'd like to know. Oh, I must have broken it. Right. What? Oh, did I not? Oops. Did I not? I didn't include it here. Right. That's embarrassing. I copied and pasted the code over. I probably should have updated it. There we go. Cool. So that's too many tabs for one thing. Maybe we might want some extra stuff in there. We'll leave that for the time being. Oh, Ben says he thinks so. I know, like, doing something like that seems to find it. I guess because it's using the fuzzy does it use the same fuzzy matching as everything else? I would assume. So that would be like a regular event listener if there was one. Maybe we could throw that in too. And again, this is sort of low scale here. This would just be, oh, shoot. That should actually have view event listener there. And this would, man, I did that all backwards. Let's do that the other way. Even in debug code, I gotta make it look correct. View specific event listener. We're going really low key on this because clearly there's a lot of, we need to work up a data structure to actually provide these things in any sort of meaningful way. But here's where case matters, I guess. EL is event listener. If I triggered this and got the irregular event listener, if I did it again, so in that regard, I guess, yes. Oh, hey, interesting. Chat's appeared in there. Let me know if that's if it's irritating to have that in place, by the way. Because I'd already forgotten that I turned it on there, but it seems to be working okay-ish. I mean, apart from that boundary that looks like it's just way too close to the bottom of that window. The margins, man, the margins. So yeah, this will get us event listener if it's uppercase. Maybe I'll even do that a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see. That's always going to get us that one unless we pick it, but this will get us the one we want. But this will also get it because it's the only thing that matches. So I guess in that regard, it is kind of case sensitive. So, but that's good to know. The next thing would be, that's just the standard list of completions we're going to return. Oh, I wonder, should we inhibit word completions or no? I kind of like them in the general case for something like this. And apparently I have more than one snippet named delete me. Let's get rid of that before we cause ourselves an issue. Now here's the thing. What do we think of this? We could call this base to get the name of the class, and then we can say if base add potentially a completion here, right? And the completions that we would add would depend on the class that we actually have here. For example, if we were inside of an event listener or a view event listener, then the completions we would add would be the methods for such thing. So we wouldn't have to remember what they are. But clearly there can be more than one location if there's more than one cursor. In which case, how do we deal with that? At some level, if we were to gather completions, like say, for example, there were two classes here. If this was a class above and this was a class here, then if this one knew it associated with this class and this knew that it associated with the class above it, then we could gather the full list of completions for both classes and add them to the list. But they'll still only allow inserting the same thing into both places, right? And I'm not really seeing a nice way to get around that issue. If someone wants to try to do something like that, they should be allowed to. We can only help people so much. But if they're different classes, I guess it's really the only way to do that, right? Safest thing to do, because so you might want to work it that way. At some point, we might even have a multiplayer game in Sublime. You mean like directly inside of Sublime as a plugin? Because there's totally semi-nascent plans for something like that. I may have mentioned I'm thinking for the month of March, I may test out doing a month's worth of live streams on the main channel instead of this channel here, and then maybe cross post the things just to see what effect it has on things, because it seems like the only way I'm going to know for sure if it's a good idea or a bad idea from a variety of algorithmic standpoints is to actually try it and see how the numbers stack up. But there'll probably be a post or a short video about that at some point soon. I'm also thinking of jumping into live streams on Twitch as well on other days. So if you have a Twitch account, you might want to. Well, you don't need a Twitch account to watch streams on Twitch, but if you want to join in the chat on Twitch, you might need a Twitch account. And for those, I'm thinking like clearly whatever I do, I'm going to work in Sublime, but not necessarily on plugins. So probably some sort of game development, which could be something web related, could be a game in Sublime. I've always wanted to finish up that Sudoku I was working on. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could easily get chess to work. One other thing I'd like to do is, I think I may have mentioned I have a web application that I wrote that runs on the iPad that I have down here under the monitor for talking with a WebSocket to OBS to be able to switch scenes and stuff like turn the chat on and off and all that other stuff. I'd like to, there's a WebSocket things for Sublime or for Python rather. So I'd like to do that in Sublime and be able to actually control things from here. Like I'm being able to come in here and say toggle chat and have it appear over there or whatever. Speaking of, I forgot I turned that on to test something the other day. And I do not want it on. Chess, that seems complicated. Depends. If you wanted to display a chessboard and have a socket connection between your copy of Sublime and someone else's copy of Sublime, and all you had to do was verify that a move is valid, and then transmit the move across, but you don't have to worry about anything else, that's probably very easy to do. That's just transitioning state, like a knight needs to be 2 up and 1 over in any of the directions, or this needs to stay on the diagonal inside of the same thing. Where chess quickly goes off the rails is that whole AI business. But yeah, the other thing is that Sudoku thing. Do I still have that plugged in here? Probably don't, do I? No, I think I probably moved it out. But I like to flesh that thing out too. Um, Automatically generating a Sudoku and then being able to test if it's solved seems like something that would be fun. I wonder if I do have that laying about somewhere. Hmm. Probably in the Devember thing, if I had to guess. Yeah, definitely not just commented out. I think I just had the Devember from 20, pardon me, from 2019 symlinked into the folder, or the Sudoku thing itself. Anyhow, well, now I got to check it out. Let's see. Would be in here, right? Okay. Do. Uh-huh. Check that out. Do we remember how this thing works? No, we don't. Also, the chat's totally in the way now. But as I recall, you can move around. You can add numbers by typing them, I think. Now, that one's clearly no good because there's already a 3 over there. So that one displays is all red. And if we put like a 9 here, then that's theoretically okay. I think there's even keys to enter notes in here, but I can't remember off the top of my head how to do it. And then, of course, the other bit is that whenever you're on a 2, all of the other 2s become brighter, so it's easier to see. I think the issue for doing chess would be coming up with this display. It's like 8 by 8, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It would easily fit in an area like this. So you would need like this has this. I have a special square font installed to be able to do this. Chess font maybe, or specific characters that represent them, like KN for knight or KI for king or something. But it's really not that tenuous an ordeal to say that if all you have to do is verify whether a move is valid, that part of chess is well defined. You know, valid moves for a knight from here are plus or -2 in the y, and then +1 or -1, and so on. This way, this would be x +2, and then y +1 or -1. If it goes out of the bounds, you don't care, etc. So yeah, that might be a fun thing to fiddle around with too. The Sudoku thing really interests me in the area of actually generating one algorithmically, because it's easy to generate random numbers into the grid and make sure that you're doing it in a way where the puzzle is solved. But it's tricky to remove items out of there to get it to the a state where you could solve it as a puzzle and generate the numbers and remove them in a way where there's only one solution, because if there's more than one possible solution to how things lay out, it can be trickier to logic your way out of it. There you go. Unicode has chess code points. I mean, probably not in the font I'm using because I'm unlucky in that regard. But yeah, and as Ben said, there's even now I was thinking of that the I've been forever since I've played chess and I've never been any good at it, but the designations of like rook to queen's 3 or what have you. There's the online chess applications and stuff have their own notation for doing that. And you ever seen the chess books that are just a transcription of games using that same moves? So yeah, on the whole, not really a big deal. If anything, I guess not even for chess. Every time you make a modification to the buffer, something's added to the undo state. So much like Terminus, you can get into that weird state where at a certain point, things start to get a little funky. Um, is that valid? Just sort of going off the top of my head there for a thing here. This message has been held for review. I think it's okay for you to display stuff. Now, the real question is, will it appear in the live stream chat? Check that out. That font totally knows how to do it. Can I copy this out and paste it? Why is that pawn so much bigger than everything else? Or is it just me that sees it that way? Oh, that one's an image. That might be one of the ones that it understands or something. But may take those out of there. Yeah, on the whole, I mean, to me, the trickiest part of working on something like that as a multiplayer game is that I'd have to play chess with somebody, and not that good at chess. Pretty good at checkers, though. Chess, though, I don't have the tactical mind to see 7 steps ahead. I'm very much that limited AI that just tries to make the best possible move for the current situation and then gets checkmated in 4 moves. What were we doing here? We need to just pondering the idea of stuff in here. Oh, the last pawn is supported by the normal font and the rest get the fallback. Yeah, the same thing happens with emojis sometimes. And then there's some emojis that for some reason in some places display, I think, with the wrong code point. I'm guessing. Something that happens in Twitch all the time. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but on this system, it displays as 3 circles connected together. But that's not what it actually is. It's some sort of character instead. But for some reason, I mean, it's not the square box or the box with the question mark in it. That would make it seem like it doesn't know what it is. All this talk of games is making me hungry. Must really find time to learn some in Lua plus Love 2D. Oh, that's tempting too. It's been a while since I used Lua. Pondering the idea of if I did something in a Twitch stream and worked on a game of some sort, how would I do it? The last time I worked on games, I did them in web development in a web page. I have an idea for, I think I may have mentioned it before, a time travel puzzle game that would be solely turn-based or simultaneous turn. So the world is paused until you do something, and when you do something, everything else in the world ticks once as well. Basically, you need to be able to sneak into a place, get an item, and get out. But there's guards that are walking around patrolling, so you need to go to a certain point through the level, and then you can travel back through time and make a time clone of yourself at the beginning, and then you go and do something else while the original clone goes and does what it originally did before you went back in time. So you have to try to maneuver a way to use your clone to distract guards to get past them and do stuff. The idea I've been working on for forever. In other news, I finally got a patch merged into GTK. Holy crap! Did, congratulations! Did you have to do some sort of ritual with a dead chicken and a pentagram? And what did you patch in there? You know what would be great if there was a way to suggest to Apple to fix their drivers. Open source your driver, Apple. I will totally fix your GL problems for you. Uh, ba, ba, ba. As a test, while we discuss things, extend is the thing that I want here, right? Actually, maybe we don't even need that. Maybe we just do this. I mean, it's ugly. If my Linux meme history is any indication, he probably suggested removing useful features and stuck in a fix during one of the patches. Yeah, I may have mentioned that that we submitted several patches to various GNU projects, glibc, GCC, and GNU Step, and only the GNU Step patches were ever actually accepted by them, and even then begrudgingly. Uh, so kudos. Although again, GTK isn't a GNU thing, right? Or is GNOME GNU? Yeah. It was a simple fix for touchscreen input on custom widgets that implement scrolling a certain way. Oh yeah. Oh, is that not oh, scrolling on the terminal for PinePhone? As soon as I saw that touchscreen scrolling thing, I immediately thought to that long-standing issue in Sublime where sometimes scrolling doesn't it stops. I think it's scrolling stops working on a touchscreen until you touch the screen again. If you come back to, I can't quite remember the details, but there's something involving a touchscreen input and scrolling. I think where things go a little wonky. I think it was scrolling. Someone mentioned it was recalled to the top of the stack just in the last like couple of weeks, if I remember mails that I have received. So here's we're going to do something like this. Oh, I should have probably done that, I suppose. We'll name it this. Yeah, and I know you're super cranky right now. Calm down there, plugin host. It's all going to be better in a minute. Ba-ba. For the purposes of testing here, we could say if actually we'll probably do this. If class name is in, let's say, view event listener or event listener. And again, this is the exploration phase of how we might pull something like this off. We clearly need a cooler data structure. Return a list of things. Just return an empty list of completions. That ought to be happy, right? Took a couple of months to get merged. For Sublime, there's generally no point in trying to patch things because it needs to work for people on old versions. Oh yeah, that makes sense. The I've mentioned several times that I only really demoed Sublime for a day or less before I chalked over the $80 to get a license, specifically because on my system it worked with the older libraries that I had installed and it worked damn well. And I thought, who's ever developing this deserves my money, even if I decide I don't like this editor, because that is like friggin' awesome. Uh, it's nice when things are, super up to date, but nobody likes to ride the bleeding edge. Like there was a year or a year and a half back, I briefly lost access to Discord on Linux because there a new build came out and they synced it to require the latest version of glibc that had just been released like 2 days prior or something, and nobody had it, and it had a symbol in it that wouldn't allow it to run on older systems, and then they realized their blunder and put out a new one. So it's nice that you guys go the extra mile to make sure that it's going to work for people in a lot of situations. You guys really get it when it comes to, well, quality software, but also a good experience for people across all platforms. Just trying to think here what magic we want to do in here. Let's say completion item. So the thing we're going to do here is, let's say, on load, for example, pardon me. And annotation is going to be, let's say, plugin event, let's say. I mean, this stuff is all open to interpretation, as is actually having some sort of sensical data structure by which this could be done without having to have a big static list of completion items. But while we're fumbling our way through how we want the code to look, that part seems less required, if you will. We would say def on load. Now, here's where we're going to get complicated. Let's do it this way then. Then a new line. The auto indent should automatically carry the cursor to the correct location, right? What I find frustrating is that getting it right isn't actually difficult if you're using CI. Or if you're using, have it run the oldest software you support. Yeah. It's kind of an astounding, bit of action there. We have, for the stuff we're working on at work right now, we have CI set up that seems to be entirely concerned with whether or not it builds, but not necessarily if it actually works the same. They're making some strides in that. Some of the web API stuff now has test drivers and stubs, so it can make requests with data and verify that it gets an answer back that it expects, but not all of them have that. The coverage isn't complete. It doesn't, last time I checked anyway, it doesn't try to make invalid requests to see what comes back. It just makes a request and verifies that what it gets is the same as it got last time. That, in a way is almost like worse than not testing at all, because it gives you that false sense of security. But it seemed very weird to me that for the longest time their whole journey was to make sure it actually compiles, particularly since most of the time their process bails out due to random errors that they can't figure out what it is. Before it actually even tries to build anything, it just decides it's probably broken and gives up. Our SDK is based on Ubuntu 12.04 or 14, so it simply won't link if you use stuff that only exists in newer versions. Hey, that's nice. Are those sort of like moving targets to some degree? I mean, at what point do you decide it's time to move the baseline up? Is there like a set, I don't know, like years back or whatever that you target for things that are still under long-term support or something like that? Because at least back in the day, the version of Slackware that I was running was like way old. I had reached the point where even like I could buy a game from Humble Bundle that was supported in Linux and it wouldn't work because my glibc version was too old. And when that happens for something like that, you know that you're like way out there. Com- Compatibility sucks. Um, Probably want something like that, and completion format. I could probably be doing this a little smarter too. There's like a completion item dot snippet. I think that shortens a lot of this up, but we're kind of down this road now. Mm, okay, that's going to be for a view event listener. And then we're going to duplicate this just to test it out. And there's an issue with this code. I don't know what it is yet, but I didn't test this before I copied and pasted it. Well, that's at least one, because that's going to have slightly different arguments. That seems to be okay. So let's see. If we were inside of here, no go. Oh, actually, because it doesn't have the full name. Right. Oh, shoot. We do it when we absolutely need something in a newer version. We dropped XP for that reason. Oh, yeah. Haven't had one for macOS 10.9 or Linux yet. And the dropping XP was like related to Python 3.8 just won't build for that or something, right? I think it's the very last thing at the bottom of the changelog, which is epically long. Yeah. And Windows Vista. That part caught me by surprise too. I would have thought that Vista was closer to 7 in functionality. But plugin idea, load that up and parse out the HTML. Let's see. Let's do this. Maybe we don't need to do that. We used to have the names of our computers used to be named based on, I guess they kind of still are, comic book noises. We always come up with a naming scheme, and we have like 4 different clusters of production machines. So Simpsons, Flintstones, South Park, and Scooby Doo. And then the machines are named like, Kenny, Cartman, Ike, Kyle, or Homer, Wilma, Fred, Barney, or Homer, Wilma. Flintstones is Fred, Barney, Betty, Bam Bam, and so forth. For our desktop systems, for some reason, we settled on comic book noises. So for a long time, I was Sploosh until I got a new computer, and then it ended up being Splash. Now it's Dart. Meanwhile, one of my other coworkers has used Bang for quite some time. And every time I type Splot, I think of that, and then I wish that there was a method named Splot. The idea here is this. We want to come up with, I forgot what I was actually doing there. The actual class name, if it happens to be a module. So it's going to end up being Nothing, right? Okay. So we could say class name is equal to this minus 1 to always get the last item out of it. So whether you imported it with Sublime plugin or not, that will work. Now, how do we write this in a clever way so that we can take advantage of the fact that it's possible for class name to be none? My druthers would be something like class name is equal to class name or this, and then do that. Can I do that inline by like putting this in place of this and wrapping it in parentheses? I can't imagine you couldn't, right? And minus 1. It's going to blow that up, huh? Oh, right. Okay. All right. Well, that seems like it's probably going to work. Cool. Let's go with that then, shall we? That'll do it all in one line. Go like so, because we're probably going to need it more than once. Now, watch this. That should probably have more tabs in it, but not too shabby. Let's just fix that, shall we? So, whoops. Here's our on load, because this is a view event listener, right? But if we were to change this to just an event listener, then I would imagine we end up with the wrong thing. Oh, did I did that. Let's put that back for just a second. That should matter not at all, right? He's still chasing the bunnies down there. He's so adorable. Double check. Inside of a view event listener, definitely the case, right? Okay, then we could say event listener, and then now why does that not do what one might expect it to do? Because it seems like, it wouldn't. What stupid thing am I doing here that causes that to not do what one might expect? Let's test it. Class name. Oh, shoot. That's probably unhappy. Completions for view event listener. Right, that's what you expect, right? And then event listener. Completions for event listener, but it's still not the same stuff. I'm going to push this button here. Now, what silly mistake have I made here such that this prints completions for event listener, but somehow this is what gets put in there? Do completions not go away once you've added them? Is that a thing? This would be just for testing purposes. That's a view event listener, all right. And when it triggers, that's what we would expect, right? Cool. And that one still seems to be view event listener, even though it called completions for event listener. And I would assume that would be this one and not that one. Oh, yeah. Hang on. Let me move that down. At great personal risk. Wait. Yeah. It should be behind everything, right? So the chat's on. Yeah. I'm assuming since it was at the very top of the stack, because I wasn't expecting that to actually work, moving it behind might actually make that a little bit different there. Let's see. I'm not above a little bit of this action. Maybe we'll also fix that. Okay, so this is on load. That's vel. It prints it. It says it's adding vel events. Cool. That's what we'd like to see. And then we add an event listener. Go like so. Okay. This doesn't do what I think it does, right? Is this converting it into a set or something? It's not whole word matching. That's the problem, right? I suppose because event listener and view is actually part of view event listener. Is that how that actually works? I kind of assumed not. I'm not against a little bit of this action, though. Okay. Whoops. Go back. If we had a view event listener. Huh. Uh-oh. Nightbot, you jerk. Hang on. I don't know why it did that. It decided that your messages should not be there, but you hadn't said anything in forever. Let's see. Let's click this thing. Let's see. You didn't say anything blacklisted. You need a oh, so one thing is not a tuple. So it's it's a set, isn't it? Yeah. Right on. You got to do something like yaw. Okay. As soon as it started like submatching there, Does anybody else see all of the chat messages? No, it apparently just tossed them all away, right? I don't know how to undo that. I don't know what it was that it thought you were doing, but I can click some buttons. We'll just go ahead and do that and apologize profusely. This isn't the first time I've seen Nightbot go crazy, but I would have thought that, the uh, the last thing that it shows me that you said was the thing about the explosion is behind the chat, and then the next thing was you're out of here. I don't know why it suddenly decided it needed to take action or something. Ah, okay. No, and normally I would do that with like square brackets. Well, not normally, but I always try to trigger myself into not doing that. Ah, was it symbols that it did something with? That could be. I've disabled all of those particular options, so it should be safe now. Uh, if you want to try pasting it back in there again, and I apologize if it goes crazy again, but all of the options are disabled there, which is actually something I was pondering doing even before because I've known that it's gone a little crazy in the past. Do a little bit of that action. Go away, you. Nice. But now, as soon as you said that, I think I've run into that in the past too. Cool. Okay. So that will solve the first one of those thingies. There and there. So now we're left with, for each one of the potential classes, we need some sort of data structure to spit these things out. And while I'm at it, that's the symbol heavy Python that it decided was upsetting. Or was that a shorter version of the whole operation? Oh, I know what I was going to do. Right on. That would be Sublime for 3.8. Okay. For something like this, we probably want these things because these are all going to be snippets that are inserted. Then we can save ourselves the hassle, right? I'm going to just stick this over here for a second. That's behind the chat, but that's okay because it's just a simple thing there to fiddle with this with. Say we replace both of those with yaw. The first thing is the trigger. Oh, we lose the ability. The annotation is in a different order that way, huh? I see. I probably should have paid more attention to what that actually was calling out there. The trigger is the trigger, the command. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Whoops. It's a reason why I much prefer D's tuples. You have to type tuple, which is always clear, unlike Python where braces is a tuple. But yeah, that's, and the related to that, the magic of, I can't even remember the circumstance now, unpacking a tuple that has multiple things into a bunch of variables, and sometimes it has to have like an extra comma on the end of the list or it gets all funky in certain situations. Just not something it happens to me so infrequently. always forget about it. I'm assuming I'm not talking too much out of my butt there. The whole thing needs to have one extra trailing comma on the end of the things. No, let's copy this whole thing as a matter of fact. It's my secret note. Nobody can see it behind the chat, but it's just this text. I mean, that's not the end of the world here. Because we probably, can make this a lot nicer by saying that's going to be the trigger. Then the next thing is going to be the actual snippet text, which is going to be these. All right, these can go up one, and we don't need to have, oops, that, because that's just the snippet. Then the next thing is going to be the annotation, and we don't really need anything fancy there. We don't need the completion format or the kind. But we do need to say details because we left the kind as kind snippet. And I believe that's how we want to keep that, right? Because these are indeed snippets. Whoops. If you scroll that down a little bit. Of all of the things that these are, the Python 2 print statement was the worst. Putting a comma at the end makes it drop the new line. I missed out on the joys of Python 2. I fiddled around with Python way back in the Python 2 days, like a millennia ago, but Python never really caught on. At the time, it sort of irritated me that it was indentation based for all of the esoteric reasons to decide not to like a language, but I never really had much call to actually use it. It wasn't until I started using Sublime that I decided I prefer it as a programming language to some other things now. I guess we do want the kind snippet on there. We don't want that. The next thing is going to be the kind, so we can leave that. So we want something like this. We should still end up with the same. Oh, did I break it? I broke it, didn't I? Shoot. I a word out. How about that, sir? Like we could change these kinds a little bit. If we wanted to fiddle with this. No, I broke that too. Because I always forget I didn't import those. Every freaking time. So now it looks like a C because it's going to insert a class, and it's a plugin class, and it's a standard event listener. When this one is a view-specific event listener. That was weird. Oh, I must have pushed left. Huh. Never occurred to me to do that before. View event listener. Okay, cool. I kind of like that. Excuse me. Now we could do the same thing up here, right? This would be completion dot, whoops, item dot snippet completion on load for this completion. And the next thing is this. We can maybe, well, we'll leave that for just the way it is. We don't need the command completion. And let us gank this line out. Maybe we fix that a little bit. That was a little dual alley, as was that. Yeah. So something like that. And I'm going to throw caution to the wind and do this. Whoops. This one doesn't need this because it's a view event listener. And that. So, and it doesn't even matter to the completion engine, but if we want it on load here, that's a plugin event, which is an E, which detects a file load completing. Cool, cool. And that would allow us to find all of the various things. So, hey, as these things go, that's not too shabby. I mean, shy a global dictionary structure that could work this stuff out. Like clearly what we would need is the completion, the snippet, and details. Details doesn't need to be a special variable if we have it that way, do we? No, it doesn't. All of those four can go away. Yeah. Because we're doing all of them in order. We specifically overrode the kind. Create an event listener with an onload event. Life's good. Imagine how much faster I'm going to be able to play with plugin ideas and help people in the forum now that I have the ability to do that. And that is looking okay. Sweet. So data structure for all of those completions. Now that's going to be all of our plugin classes. That's going to be the various methods inside of one of these things for defining classes. So the last part, I guess, is what about methods on things that are not classes you're defining yourself? Is the next item on the list. Although we are coming pretty close to the end of 2 hours. I do have to get up for one of those ridiculous early morning meetings because there's somebody in the UK that's on the meeting and someone in Boston that's in the meeting, and then there's us in Vancouver. So we've decided on a time that makes everybody unilaterally unhappy, though I'm pretty sure the guy in the UK is probably slightly less unhappy than us. So I can't keep going for tonight, but the general idea would be that we would want to actually look at the prefix to see what's to the left and then do something with it. Like if the prefix was view, then stick all of the view methods on here. Well, not the hidden ones, but you know, these ones. Bonus points. If this thing could determine what version of Sublime you were running, you'd have to specify what version you're targeting, so that's not cool. But you know, for example, if we typed the word view, this could return buffer and buffer ID as completions. Here's something interesting. It needs to be able to find all of the things that are related to that, right? So there's the text view, but what if it looked like this? Then we don't get a prefix, right? Because I'm pondering in my head, what are the situations you would type view dot, and this will go. Oh, there's actually something that we want to. There's an extra flag we want to pass to this. I thought if completion should be requeried as the user types, right? Theoretically, if we return something like this, tuple, flags first element being a list, second element being Oh, we don't need to do that. Yeah. Yeah, I know there's garbage in there. Leave me and my garbage code alone, compiler. I swear. Okay, so now we see it getting invoked multiple times, right? I guess the trick is doing it for the dot and then looking to the left of the dot to see what we want there. Or if the prefix is empty and the character to the left is a dot, something along those lines, because we might also want to do sublime.active window.active view. And in that case, it also needs to know, because it's active view, that it's a view to the left. This is a level of completion stuff that I have not previously played with. So there's that. Is that the best way to go about? Because there's also having the auto completion panel trigger as a result of pressing the dot key and having it pop open. And there's that setting that controls that, but we can't really control whether or not that happens in a plugin just based on scope. So I don't know that that's necessarily something to deal with. That is probably something to ponder on, I would imagine. This chat thing. Oh, actually, yeah. We got that to work. I should say we got that to work. For some reason, my chair feels lower, but because I moved the order of that thing around, what if that was a success? Yeah, it went over the chat. Cool. Oh, that probably means this one should work too. I think this one makes a noise now. I can't remember if I set that up. You jerk. Yeah. All right. Well, that one's on me. The last time I was playing with that, I managed to crash out OBS, and I don't think it saved me putting the thing back where it was. I was trying to get it to be relative to the webcam so that it would track as I move around. Like if I was to do yaw, then the explosions would still go over my head. It didn't quite work out for me. I need to work on the math for it, so I switched it back the other way. And then OBS blew up on me. But I think that is a thing here. Let's go ahead and press this button. We had a good run on stuff that we're doing here. Oh wait, actually, let's go ahead and redact that out for the time being, because I don't know that that's necessarily the greatest thing in the world. But what we can work on next, and maybe work on this on a stream, maybe not. The data structure for these things to make them a little bit nicer. And then there could even be like a JSON file that the thing loads or something. That'd be cool. Then it's controlled by external forces. All right, and just to see, should still work in this one as well. Check that out. Of course, I have to remember to lean back like yeah, because there's not necessarily a good place for that, or I could slide it around the other way. I think that one needs to be a little bit taller. I don't know that necessarily needs to be there all the time. But it was a pretty good experiment. I think in a pretty good stream. I mean, I spelled some stuff wrong. I wrote a function and then forgot to call it and wondered why it didn't print anything. And I didn't add a superfluous, well, not superfluous as it turns out, comma into some parentheses in order to turn it into a tuple. But apart from that, success. And who can ask for more than that? Now, extra success because we had some nice visitors on the chat here, and I'm gonna say it was a pretty good night. Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining in. See you next week. Yeah, there should be at least one more stream on this channel before I switch to the other the main channel for just a few streams just to see how that affects live streaming as a whole, if it's going to affect viewership or uh, performance of videos on the channel, just to see and test that sort of stuff out. And remember, I'm also probably going to do some randomly stuff on Twitch if you want to just, hang around in the chat and watch stuff. I'm envisioning that what I work on there would be in Sublime, but probably something like a game development or some other uh, development tasks that I wouldn't necessarily do in a stream like this, like working on Snappy and updating the help, working on the documentation for this stuff. That's still a programming task where it would be fun to do it live for the purposes of just chatting with people while getting it done. I mean, it would be cool to have that sort of distraction, if you will. Sounds like a normal day to me. Yeah. My normal days lately are being in meetings and then being in meetings about meetings and then being in a meeting about how not enough code was developed because we were in too many meetings. I'm really hoping to hit the lottery sometime soon. In the meantime, we keep on keeping on. So thanks everybody for watching and experiencing the joy that is the chat. Again, apologies to Ben for Nightbot going absolutely mental for no readily explicable reason whatsoever. I guess semi-explicable, but I would have thought symbols had more to do with emotes and less to do with parentheses. People do weird things when they spam. But you're all a great bunch. And until the next live stream, this is me thanking you for joining the live stream, and we'll see you then. And I'm going to fumble for a button down here because I moved the thing. Yeah. I think this is the one we want. So have a good night, everyone.